begin with verse number 11. Verse number 11. Verse number 11. I'm going somewhere. I want to build something on this. Now the angel of the Lord came and sat under the terebinth tree, which was in Ophrah, which belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, while his son Gideon threshed wheat in the winepress in order to hide it from the Midianites. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said to him, "The Lord is with you, you mighty man of valor." Gideon said to him, "O my Lord, if the Lord is with us, if the Lord is with us, why then has all this happened to us? If the Lord is with us, why then has all this happened to us? And where are all his miracles, which our fathers told us about, saying, did not the Lord bring us up from Egypt? But now the Lord has forsaken us and delivered us into the hands of the Midianites." Then the Lord turned to him and said, "Go in this might of yours, and you shall save Israel from the hand of the Midianites. Have I not sent you?" And he said to him again, "O my Lord, how can I save Israel? Indeed, my clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house." And the Lord said to him, "Surely I will be with you, and you shall defeat the Midianites as one man." I want to focus in more so today, because I dealt a little bit with this text last time. And I want to focus in today and next week. I want to really focus in on this because this is very essential for where we are right now. And I want to share just a thought with you. Courage in a crisis. Courage in a crisis. Courage in a crisis. I want to really give you some principles for overcoming defeat. Courage in a crisis. Now notice, I want to focus in on Gideon's response to the angel of the Lord. About maybe a month and a half ago, a few weeks ago, if you will, I started something on the power of a question. And we opened up Kingdom Summit with that. And I shared a little bit on that, the power of a question. And I want to revisit this from an entirely different vantage point. I want to really borrow your imagination for this because I really think that we have some things here that we can really unpack. And one of the things that I want us to understand when it comes to questions, by way of review, questions are tools. Questions are tools. So I want you to make sure you take good notes today because there's going to be some things that are going to be released. Questions are tools. Questions are tools. And so it is essential for us to recognize that whenever we ask questions, they are tools for what's coming ahead. And a lot of times we spend more time seeking answers than asking questions. Seeking answers than asking questions. Throughout the Gospels, you'll find that there were over 300, some scholars will say over 300 questions that Jesus asked. And he only answered about maybe 3 or 4 questions that were asked to him. One of the chief ways that rabbis communicated in ancient Palestine was through the delivery of questions. So there are questions that we must begin to wrestle with and wrestle through if we are to fully understand and have a better appraisal of the season that we are in. Whenever you go to purchase something, if you're purchasing a home, or you're buying something, they have to give an appraisal. An appraisal gives you the estimate. It gives you the value of what that thing is worth. And what I want us to understand is that questions give us an appraisal of our lives. It enables us to recognize where we are and to be sensitive to the season that we are in so that we are able to move effectively for where we are headed. And so there are some questions that I have wrestled internally in my spirit to really begin to make an appropriate appraisal for the season that we are walking in. So questions are tools. Questions are tools. Questions birth insights. Questions birth insights. We'll lay a foundation first and then I'll shift gears. Questions birth insights. Jesus looks over and says at Caesarea Philippi, whom do men say that I am? And it is out of that question that Peter gets the revelation of who he is. In Matthew 16, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And then Jesus says, flesh and blood has not revealed that to you, but my Father in heaven, and upon this rock I will build my church. So the church is formed through question. A question that is asked to Jesus gives an insight that opens their understanding into something they had never seen before. So questions birth insight. Secondly, questions bring intimacy. Questions bring intimacy. You can really begin to understand where people are around you, close to you, connected to you by the questions they are asking. Questions bring intimacy. And finally, when it comes to questions, questions are instruments. They are instruments that bring an invitation to a conversation. Questions are instruments that bring an invitation to a conversation. All right, the Spirit's going to have to stretch today because I'm going totally different dimension. Questions are instruments and they are an invitation to a conversation. So what we must understand is that there's already something happening. Heaven is always active. And one of the challenges is whenever we are in seasons of uncertainty, we are uncertain, but that does not mean that God is uncertain. So heaven is always active even when we're reactive. Heaven is always active even when we are reactive. Gideon has no understanding of the full picture. So he's reacting to what he sees in front of him, without the realization that although he doesn't know what's going on, God is at work. And if you're not careful, you will misread the signs in front of you based upon the emotion and what you're feeling in that moment without a full appraisal of what God is doing in the particular season you're standing in. So we understand and begin to wrestle with questions are tools. They bring insights. They bring intimacy. They are instruments and they are instruments and they are an invitation to conversation. Whether it's a conversation externally with someone or internally. In this passage, Gideon is wrestling with himself. And there's something very powerful here because we begin to understand the root and the source of discouragement. The root and source of discouragement comes to us when our expectations in our lives have not been realized. Let's take it a step further. Notice, in light of where we are in our present society, in the world in which we are living, and all the things that are happening faster than you're even able to adjust to it. It's very easy to start singing the blues. That is, to be depressed or discouraged. Look at the state of the economy or your economy, and you can become discouraged, especially around holiday time. Somebody tell the truth and say amen. Look at the state of your own finances, and you can become discouraged. Look at world events, especially in North Korea, and you can become discouraged. Look at the behavior of most unbelievers and you can become discouraged. But newsflash, look at the behavior of believers and you can become discouraged. All right, look at sickness, pain, and suffering experienced by you, family, friends, and you can become discouraged. Discouragement can happen before you even try to make it happen. It is very easy to become discouraged. But looking at the life of Gideon, we find an ability to begin to move to overcoming defeat. At the beginning of chapter 6, the Midianites were nomads who dwelled in the desert. So they were skilled in dry places. And because they were skilled in dry places, at the time of harvest, they would show up and steal what was in the land. But in the midst of this problem, the angel of the Lord appears to Gideon. And he says something very strange, very strange, very strange. And this thing has been stirring with me. I will then wake up with this passage still in my spirit. The Lord is with you, you mighty valiant warrior, the Hebrew translation says. You mighty man of valor. He looks at him and calls him valiant. He looks at him and calls him powerful when he feels pathetic and weak. He looks at him and sees him beyond how he sees himself. That's right. And that is a picture of how God sees us. Yes. That is a picture. We, as New Testament believers, we read the Old Testament with New Testament lens. And so, as believers, it is a picture of the grace of God. Because in spite of the things we have done, and despite of the things that are about our lives, and despite the stuff that is all written on the report card in our lives, God looks past it through the lens of his Son and says, you're mighty. Hallelujah. And notice what happens. He looks at him and he says to him, you are a mighty man of valor. He doesn't feel mighty, doesn't feel strong, doesn't feel powerful, but that is why when I am weak, he makes me strong. Amen. Looks at him and says, you're mighty. And by the angel of the Lord telling him this, Gideon begins to ask two questions. This is what I really want to land in. Two questions is fine. Two questions that begin to disclose his discouragement. Notice the two questions he asks. First, in verse number 13. So he gives a rebuttal to the revelation. He gives a rebuttal to the revelation. He says, Lord, if the Lord is with us, why then has all this happened to us? Where are the miracles which our fathers told us about, saying, did not the Lord bring us up from Egypt? But now the Lord has forsaken us and delivered us into the hands of the Midianites. So notice what happens. He wrestles between two questions. Essentially, why us or why me and where is God? Come on now. Why me and where is God? And whenever you are in a cycle of discouragement, the first question you wrestle with is, why is this happening to me? Secondly, where is God? When a prayer is not answered the way you expect, why me? Where's God? When someone tragically leaves and you had no way to say goodbye, why me? Where is God? Talk to me, somebody. There are moments in our journey in which discouragement comes, and when discouragement comes, we begin to internally wrestle with questions. Wrestle with questions. And we often ask the same two questions. And in the case of Gideon, God took him from being defeated to being victorious. God took him from being defeated to being victorious. And whether you're in the sanctuary, whether you're tuning in, or whether you're watching it on a replay, or wherever you are, God will take you from defeat to victory. And despite how discouraged you might be by how things look in front of you, statistics tell us that the holiday season is the highest time of depression. And despite all of the things happening around us, God says to Gideon, and God says to you, the Lord is with you. Whether you feel like it or not, whether it doesn't look like it or not, whether things don't make sense or not, the Lord is with you. All right, lean over and somebody tell the Lord Lord is with you. The Lord is with you. He has to take him from being defeated to being victorious. He has to take him from singing the blues internally to moving into blessing. In this story, there are some guidelines we find for handling discouragement. Number one, let's look at and acknowledge the reasons for discouragement. The reasons for discouragement. There are reasons. And so we have to begin to ask, what exactly has me discouraged? What exactly has me discouraged? You want to begin to create an appraisal for where you are. So what exactly has me discouraged? We can't look at just surface reasons, but we have to begin to dig deep. And there are many reasons for discouragement. I'll just deal with 4 today and then I'll close. The first is an unpleasant condition. An unpleasant condition. An unpleasant condition. It was Rosa Parks who said, without a vision the people perish, but without courage dreams die. An unpleasant condition. Without a vision the people perish, but without courage dreams die. An unpleasant condition. And there will be moments and seasons in your journey in which there are unpleasant conditions. This is the most obvious. Gideon and the children of Israel were discouraged by the unpleasant conditions that they needed to face. So while there was strength in the struggle, they were in a very and an extremely painful season. And while they're in this unpleasant condition, they begin to see all of the other things that are going wrong around them. They're looking and their food is being taken from them. They're looking and they no longer have access to walk around and to move. Their mobility is limited. So there are tons of unpleasant conditions. And I'm sure if you wanted to ever meddle in misery, you could write down a list of everything that's unpleasant going on in front of you. There were unpleasant conditions, but even though there were unpleasant conditions, God still was working something and preparing something for them. And so we have to move from an unpleasant condition to then begin to recognize an uncommitted burden. An unpleasant condition to an uncommitted burden. An unpleasant condition to an uncommitted burden. And here's something that I don't think we really begin to understand when it comes to this. And this is why a lot of times we're in liminal space, because we're trying to figure out all that's going on around us and trying to figure out all the stuff that's happening in front of us. But one thing we must recognize and realize, whenever there is something going on in our lives as believers, whenever we start to feel overwhelmed, whenever we start to feel discouraged, we have to commit our burden to the Lord in prayer. Stress is an indicator to pray.
Amen. Amen.
Stress is an indicator to pray. Stress is an indicator to pray. The moment you begin to feel overwhelmed. This week, I'm sitting there and things are happening and all that, and I had to get on my knees and say, Lord, hold it. I'm overwhelmed. I'm in over my head. Hold it. I need your help right now.
Yeah.
Have you ever been in a moment in which things totally overwhelm you and you didn't know what was getting ready to take place, and you turn around and tackle one thing and something else slaps you, and you turn around and tackle that and something else slaps you, and then you turn around tackling that and something else, and all of a sudden the bill you thought you didn't even exist that maybe happened years ago, somehow or another gets mailed to you that day, and now you're trying to figure out how to handle all of these things. And yet while you're wrestling with being overwhelmed, it's an indicator to say, God, I can't handle it. I need you.
I need you. Amen. Amen.
Lean over at somebody and tell them, I need the Lord's help for this. I need the Lord's help. I need his help. I need him to help me. I need him to walk with me. I need him to stand with me. I need him to stand by me. I need the power of God to intervene in my life. Stress is always an indicator to pray. It is always an assignment allowing us to recognize it's time to seek his face. It's time to begin to discern what he's doing and what he is saying. So discouragement is inevitable. I'll never forget one day I was with a pastor having a time of lunch. You can't really eat lunch at Starbucks, so I wouldn't call it lunch. He just took me out, and I enjoy Starbucks, but it's not like I go there for food. Ain't no fried chicken there, no jerkin, whatever you like, ain't there. Amen. You know, they have the little plates and the little things. And so I'm sitting there, and he's talking to me, and he's like, yeah, let's do lunch. And he said, Starbucks. I said, well, it won't be lunch today. Praise God. So I went in there and prepared myself to eat after I left. And so I'm sitting there, and he said to me, he said, Sharon, he said, one thing I'm discouraged about you. And when he said this, at first I thought he was joking, in my spirit shifted. He said, God has given you a gift. I was telling him about what happened when we first got this building and fire, and we were moving around and moved 5 times and all of that stuff, giving him the whole shebang. And he looked at me and he smiled and he said, God has given you the gift of trouble. I said, what do you mean by that? He said, there are some people, he said, that God will give them the gift of trouble. I said, Stevenson, run that by me again. What are you talking about? He said, God has given you the gift of trouble. He said, because you recognize and understand that through what you've experienced, you see his hand in a greater way. That enables those around you to trust him, and their faith would not have been enlarged if they had not seen you walk through it. Can I suggest to you this morning that some things you're facing in your life is not really just for you, but it's for those that God has assigned you. There are some things that you're enduring, some stuff you're walking through that you don't even have to deal with on your own, but it's because of the grace and mercy of God that he's enabling you to be a testimony to those who don't even understand the test they're wrestling with. So this is not the end of the road, but a bend in the road to the destination God has for my life. So notice what happens. Gideon's life reveals to us that pain is a gift. Won't be able to get through all this. I'll finish next week. Gideon's life reveals to us that pain is a gift. Gideon asked specific questions. Why me? Where is God? The same questions we ask when we are defeated. So discouragement is inevitable. Discouragement is inevitable, but you have to behave your way through it even when you don't believe your way through it.
Come on now.
Say it again. You have to behave your way through it even when you don't believe your way through it. So even while discouragement is there, there must be a determination in the soil of your soul that says, like Job, though he slay me, yet will I trust him. While I'm in the midst of a challenge, while I'm in the midst of a test, while I'm in the midst of a circumstance that does not make sense right now, I'm going to trust you in spite of, because I understand, even though this doesn't make sense, I believe you said in Romans 8:28 that all things work together. It's not making sense right now, but I understand that there's something working for me. So while the pain is in front of me, there's something working for me. So the pain is ultimately tied to a purpose, and if the purpose is tied to the pain, then my pain is my gift.
Come on now. Come on now. Teach it.
Notice something here. Gideon was not a man of valor yet, but one word from God changed his destiny forever. And I came this morning to declare over this house, one word from God will shift your life forever. No matter how it looks, no matter how it seems, no matter how things get, all you need is one word from God. One word from God will move you from poverty into prosperity. One word from God will take you from lack into overflow. One word from God. I want you to touch somebody and tell them one word from God. 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 You don't need a whole sack of confirmations every time. You don't need a whole sack of cosigns every time. All you need is one word from God. And news open your mouth and give God a praise in this room. Hallelujah. Let me finish this thing. So discouragement is inevitable. Discouragement, take a step further. Discouragement is inevitable. Discouragement is inevitable. Oh, I'm doing better with time than I thought. Discouragement is inevitable. You have to behave your way through it even when you don't believe your way through it. Gideon wasn't a man of valor yet, but his behavior dictated his response. His behavior dictated his response. So he had to become it by behaving like it to behold it. I'm going to say it again. He had to become it by behaving like it to behold it. So the real question that you have to begin to ask the Spirit whenever you're in a season of discouragement, a season of transition, a season of uncertainty is, who must I become? Because there is an ultimate end in mind, in the mind of God, for where you are right now and where he's getting ready to take you. And that's why you can't get nervous. Hear me clearly, church. You can't get nervous when the scenery around you changes as you begin to step into new seasons of your life. Because there are some people you have to treat like scaffolding. Hear me carefully. Scaffolding is great. We have some construction minds and stuff in here. Scaffolding is great. It's great. It's wonderful. But scaffolding serves a purpose. Scaffolding is only on the building while the building is being fixed on. Once the building is complete, the scaffolding is removed so the building can stand in its place. You sitting around trying to figure out why some folks and some things ain't the way it was before. Because God has removed the scaffolding off your life. And you're now being positioned and prepared for who he really has assigned for you. So you can't get nervous when scaffolding starts being removed. Because scaffolding being removed is preparation for your next season. And God sent me, I hear the Holy Ghost say even now, that there's some of you who have been in a place in which you're trying to figure out how things are going to work and how things are going to come together. But in this season, before this year is out, before the clock strikes on December 31st, there will be some scaffolding that's going to come off. And there's going to be an understanding that's going to be released because of what God has assigned for your life. You have to become it by behaving like it to behold it. To behold it. To behold it. Give me a chord softly, I'm closing. To behold it. To behold it. We watched a movie. Softly, we watched a movie. While we were on honeymoon, we watched a movie called The Help. The Help. My wife said, "You never seen this movie?" I said, "No, I didn't see it. Never saw it." And the movie was a phenomenal movie. And there was a line in the movie that never left me. And you know, I'm newly married and all that. So whenever something hits me, whether I was when I was at my house in Brooklyn and now where I am, I can't. Once it hits my spirit, it can't leave me. That's just how it goes. So whether it's a movie, whether it's a tweet, whatever, if it's in my spirit, it's not going to leave me. I'm going to talk about it as much as I feel it. And there was something in that movie that was said. The mother looked at the girl who put the book together and she said, "Sometimes courage skips a generation." Thank you for restoring courage to our family. Sometimes courage skips a generation. And I believe that when we look at the book of Judges, God raises up courageous people who begin to see beyond where they are to where God has assigned them to be. I have to become it by behaving like it to behold it. Who must I become? Who must I become? Recently, got married, but one of the things people ask me all the time, "How you doing? How you doing? How you doing? How you doing? How you doing?" Now, most times people ask you how you doing, they don't really want to know how you're doing. Now, everybody is not the same. Okay? So you gotta peep in the spirit who you telling stuff to, because you might be telling the devil. All right? But notice something. I had to behave my way through it before it manifested. So by the time the manifestation came, it was much easier because my behaviors had already changed. Are you following what I'm saying? A lot of times we pray for things, but we don't change our behavior. And if you don't change your behavior, when that which you have prayed for, whether it's delayed or when it does come, you'll mismanage the blessing.
That's right. That's right.
Because your behavior has not adjusted to the change. Am I making sense today?
Hallelujah.
Okay? And so I had to change my behavior. That means I had to change my way of speaking, my tone of understanding, and to become teachable enough to learn the ways of walking with someone. Gideon needed a paradigm shift. So I have to behave my way through even when I don't know my way through. Why me? Where is God? When seasons change, you will always encounter these questions. When prayers aren't answered the way you expect. When relationships fail and your heart is broken. It is only the word of the Lord that heals your wounds.
That's right.
And then you respond in worship and in awe. Gideon needed clarity to get his pain in perspective. To understand that while he feels defeated right now, while he feels discouraged right now, there is something else coming. And if he is able to have a clear word from God, in spite of his situation, one word from God will change his life forever.
God bless you, my friend. I want to thank you so much for watching this video. I pray that a word was spoken that transforms and changes your life. Please stay connected with us, www.globalfirenow.com. I'd love to hear from you. Expect greater.